Okay, welcome back to episode 3 of the Public Comment. I'm Keegan Sievenaller, and I'm here with Kim Morisaki, the Executive Director of the Northwest Montana Community Land Trust, and also my first boss.
Oh, I love that.
Thanks for being here.
I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. So when I graduated college, I did an AmeriCorps fellowship with the Land Trust, and I have such positive feelings for the Land Trust and the work they do. So I wanted to have you in to talk about that and what the Land Trust is doing now, because you've had a really, really busy few years.
Well, you set the bar really high as my first employee at the Land Trust. And now I have Grace Katie working for me, and she is, I think, the same year as you, but she graduated from Flathead. So I love having all you local 20-something-year-olds working for the Land Trust. It's great.
While you mentioned that, I think one thing I love about the Flathead Valley is the extent to which it's like a parochial place. And there's a lot of people that do try to come back here and work jobs in the same place they grow up. And it's one of the things that I'm always fighting for in terms of housing affordability, is that there's this vision of the valley as a place where you can grow up and then come back to. And that's like really dependent on making sure that as the valley grows and as it gets more expensive, there's the type of housing to accommodate that. So it's funny, even in your two-person organizations, you can see it's people who really love this area coming back and trying to get back to it.
Yep, and trying to make it good for other people as well. I definitely am seeing that in the people, the 20 and 30-something-year-olds who are coming back here. Yeah. They've got a reason for what they're trying to do here as well. So that's great. It kind of leads right into what I tell most people my age when they want to talk about housing affordability is, if you want your kids to be able to move back here, if you want people who work in the healthcare arena or take care of you at the shops that you go to, you better care about affordable housing, because how the heck is a 20-something-year-old supposed to be able to afford to live here under the current circumstances?
So something we discussed in the first episode of our podcast is we read Escaping the Housing Trap. And what they define the housing trap is as, we need housing prices to fall to have like a functioning economy, to have healthy generational changeover in wealth and stuff like that. And at the same time, we can't afford them to fall, because the same people who want their kids to be able to move back are also people who have been told by society to bet their entire retirement on housing prices always going up.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so that's the environment that housing organizations in the valley kind of find ourselves coming into. Off that, I'd love for you to explain a little bit about what the Land Trust does, because I think people normally think about land trusts for conservation.
Right. This is the opposite of that.
Yeah, in some ways, but also, I mean, you're conserving a community resource for the future,
Right.
which I think is an important part
Right.
of how the Land Trust differs from other affordable housing organizations.
I always emphasize the community part of the Community Land Trust, in that Community Land Trust has been around for over 50 years. They started in Georgia, and they were, at that time, very focused on making it possible for groups of people to have land to farm. So they've moved that concept to housing, and basically it is holding the land that is under houses in the trust for the community, and that land is held in the trust forever. So you basically, when you buy a home and put it in the land trust, the title for the home and the title for the land are separated. So there's two different titles. The title for the land stays with the land trust forever in perpetuity, that it's a nonprofit, and the bylaws say it can never be sold. And the house itself is sold at the most affordable price possible while taking out the cost of the land. And in the Flathead, where the cost of the land has gone from $30,000 for a city lot to $190,000 or $150,000 for a city lot in 10 years, taking the cost of the land out of the purchase price of a home suddenly makes it seem a little more affordable.
And one of the other unique things about a land trust is that affordability is permanent. Could you explain how that works?
Yeah, so different community land trusts do it differently. Here in the Flathead, everybody who buys a community land trust house has a $25 per month ground lease. that is a legal document that is recorded with the county. And in the language in that ground lease says that when you sell the house, you get 100% of what you paid for the house, plus you get 25% of the increase in the market value during the period that you owned the house. So we get an appraisal when you buy the house, we get an appraisal when you want to sell the house. So it's the value of your house is always going up, but it's not going up as fast as the market. And I always tell people, if you can afford to buy the land, then you should buy the land. Yeah. But if you can't afford to buy the land, and if you're going to be stuck renting the rest of your life, the community land trust is the perfect next step to not rent and actually get some of that money you're paying every month to the bank back when you sell the house.
This might be a long podcast because everything you say, I've got like 8 ways I want to go because it's just so fascinating. There's a few things built into the land trust model that I think are interesting in terms of the assumptions it makes. The first is that it kind of acknowledges that 100% of the appreciation of housing costs going to private individuals who own the land, especially appreciation of land costs in particular, is like not good for the community, right? And that a portion of that retained for kind of future affordability is really useful, right? So I think that kind of dovetails a lot with kind of how Shelter WF thinks about the way in which housing can distort wealth. There's a stat that the amount of wealth generated by housing prices appreciated, 2022 is the first time that exceeded the amount of wealth generated by other economic activity in the United States. Yeah,
I did not know
it's
that.
crazy.
Yeah.
So speculation on land cost is in some ways America's biggest industry now. And the land trust is sort of a response to that, which I find interesting. The other is, you talk about that gap between renting and homeownership and the way that the land trust fills that as a gap that in the past was kind of filled by starter homes.
Yes.
Something we don't really build anymore.
Don't build starter homes anymore. And in my opinion, it's crazy. Because if you look at the east side of Kalispell, Columbia Falls, or Whitefish, there are all these cute little houses that were built, I don't know, 50, 60, 80 years ago. But nowadays we think that a house that's only 1,000 square feet or 1,200 square feet is too small, and it has to have granite countertops and it has to have 4 bedrooms and a big family room or whatever. Well, people raise their families from beginning to end in 2-bedroom, 1-bath houses or 3-bedroom, 1-bath houses that were less than 1,200 square feet in Columbia Falls and Kalispell. And now we think they're charming. Like, we love the east side of Kalispell.
Well, and those assumptions about what a modern house need to be are also built into our zoning code.
Yes.
This is always the thing that I point out. The neighborhoods that are looked back on the most fondly and in a lot of places the most desirable are the ones built before zoning.
Yes. Well, and you talk with people about that and they're like, oh no, density is a 4-letter word. But density, I mean, if you look at a neighborhood in downtown Whitefish, those lots are tiny.
Yeah.
And nobody would be like, oh no, east side of Whitefish is too dense. But those lots are small.
Yeah.
So why do the new subdivisions that we're building today have to have bigger lots than the houses that we built 40 or 50 years ago in the downtown propers of our beloved communities? The other thing is about zoning, that is I'll get on my soapbox here for a minute.
The safe space.
Is that you look on any street in any of these towns in this valley and you can see a great big house, mansion that was built a long time ago next to a little bungalow, and then next to another house that somebody's renting out the basement to the rookie cop for the police department. And then down the street from there is another big house with a garage that has an apartment above it that is also being rented out. And then maybe somebody's got a mother-in-law apartment in their backyard. Like, those houses were all built on the same street.
Yeah.
They don't all have to be the same size. They don't all have to be that same look. They don't all have to serve the same purposes. Some can be rented and some could be owned. And this idea that when we do a housing development, everybody in the neighborhood has to be exactly the same size of home and the same kind of ownership and the same situation. I don't know where that idea came from, but the sooner we get rid of it, I think the better off we'll all be.
I've seen the housing market kind of analogized to an ecosystem in this way, where resilient ecosystems are diverse. And what you get in the housing system right now is monocultures, right?
Yes.
The same way you have a monoculture crop that the soil washes away. In a lot of ways, our regulatory scheme, anyone who's in that system is incentivized to build one type of thing. We have such a prescriptive regulatory environment that is really damaging to the resiliency of like the valley.
Yes.
Both financially and I think community wise.
You know, the good news is that we regulated ourselves into this problem, so we can probably regulate ourselves out of it as well if we just decide that that's what we need to do. And there's some private property rights, which should be near and dear to every Montanan's heart, that if I paid for my property and bought my house, I should probably be able to do whatever I want with that property.
Yeah,
and it shouldn't really matter that the neighbor doesn't think I should have an ADU.
In the land trust, you say, well, if you can afford the land, you should buy it. I kind of think that's very similar in terms of when you have people opposing development. It's like, well, if you don't want this vacant lot to be turned into something that you don't like,
that's exactly it.
Like you could purchase and do your own thing with it,
yes.
right?
Well, and there are people in this community who sold the land and then wanted to tell people what they could do with it after they sold it. Well, when you take that money and put it in your bank account, that's it. Your right to say what happens on that land is gone.
Totally.
Sorry. My libertarian DNA. This is what happens when you have a 6th-generation Montanan. It just all comes out.
Yeah. So I do want to get into a little bit of background of where you come from, where the land trust comes from, and then how they came together. Land trust starts after the 2008 recession, correct?
Yes. So Catherine King, who was working at the city of Kalispell at that time, was able to apply for 2 different rounds of grant funding through, it was called the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, NSP. That came out of the Obama administration of trying to get all those homes that had ended up in foreclosure and the banks were holding on to them. They had all these people with no housing and all these banks that were sitting empty. And this was the solution, was the NSP program. And so in Kalispell, the city of Kalispell applied for those funds, and then they just worked with Community Action Partnership, and they set up a nonprofit board. And between those 3 entities, they started buying houses off the foreclosure market. Community Action Partnerships staff would go in and rehab them if they needed anything. And then they would separate the title of the land from the title for the house and sell the house at a very reasonable price. So some of those houses in 2012, by the time they were purchased and then resold, they were selling for $80,000, $90,000, $120,000 in Kalispell. And they did that. They ended up with 52 of those homes. They were able to use that grant money to just start recycling. They would sell one and then they'd go buy another one. They'd sell that one and buy another one. So those original 52 houses now have been, some of them have been sold once, twice, or even 3 times. And even after being sold a 3rd time, they're still being sold for $220,000, $250,000. And some of them, I just sold the house for $160,000, $165,000. And that was after I put tens of thousands of dollars of remodeling to it. I bought it, gave the kitchen an upgrade and some new flooring, and sold it to somebody, a woman who works in the community and has a little boy, and they were thrilled to have this 900 square foot house.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So one thing that's interesting to me is that the land trust was created, it was founded to solve a problem of too many empty houses.
Yes.
And now the land trust exists in an economic environment that is almost the opposite.
It is exactly the opposite.
I think a lot of your remit as executive director has been that transition.
Yeah. I started working for the land trust right at the end of 2020. And my family's been in construction for 3 generations, and my husband's a builder. And so we went through that 2008, 2009 horror show, and that was awful as well. Luckily, thanks to the city of Kalispell, they were able to do something good. But by the time you got to 2020, there were no houses to buy off the foreclosure market, and prices were through the roof, and the whole organization had to have a different model. And it took a little while to figure that out. We didn't really start buying more houses until 2022. So Jerry Dunker, when he did the Trailview neighborhood, came to the city of Whitefish and said, for a little bit more density, I would happily put these houses into a deed restricted model and sell them for basically what it cost me to build them. And he did that for 48 houses, and then 10 of them he sold at market rate. And because they had been deed restricted already, they were affordable enough that when they came up for sale, the land trust could come in after having done some fundraising to buy the land and buy the price of the house down further. And so that was the first model of what we were doing in this new scenario that we had to deal with. So we were able to get houses. Gosh, most of them were in the $300,000 range, new houses in Whitefish, and a couple of them we were even able to get down into the 180, 190, 220 range with some extra funding and extra fundraising. So that was exciting. Once we kind of got that model figured out, then we started talking to people in Kalispell who had houses that they were willing to sell a little bit below market rate to us. So there's lots of fundraising involved, but there is a way to do it.
That also has kind of let the land trust expand from being purely Kalispell to kind of around the Flathead Valley, including here in Whitefish. Could you talk a little bit more about kind of what you have planned for Whitefish moving forward?
So we've built partnerships with Housing Whitefish, Whitefish Housing Authority, Habitat for Humanity, NeighborWorks Montana. I'm a big believer that 2 + 2 = 5 if you can figure out how to make it happen. And those partnerships are doing that. So as Housing Whitefish is going to build houses, the land trust will come alongside and partner however we can to make that better, cheaper, smoother. And then we'll help with fundraising if that's necessary. And then those houses will go into the land trust and they will remain permanently affordable using that same land trust model. We did the same thing with Habitat. City of Columbia Falls actually donated some land and right now the land is in the land trust's name, but Habitat is building the houses on them. And when those 6 houses are done, we will have 80 houses. So we have gone from 52 up to 80, which is exciting.
Wow.
And those houses, again, will be permanently affordable. The great thing about partnering with Habitat is that they're talking to people and selling houses to people who are at 80% area median income and lower. But we actually can go up to 140% area median income. And so that's quite a wide range of income levels for different household sizes. So just to give you a frame of reference, 140% area median income for a family of 4 in the Flathead Valley is $140,000.
Yeah.
And for a single person, 140% AMI is $100,000.
What does it say about the Flathead that people earning above the area median income still can be served by a program like yours?
Well, I don't know that it's just the Flathead. I think it's the whole entire state of Montana.
Yeah.
Even though land in this state seems wonderfully abundant, the land value is out of balance with the wages that are paid here. And that has something to do with how sparse the population is here. Like when you have more population in a place, businesses can be more profitable typically because they have more customers to serve and they can pay higher wages. And when you've got a sparse population in a place that everybody wants to own a piece of it, sometimes those things get out of balance.
I think this is really key because a lot of people think that what we do and what you do is opposed or contradictory, right? In terms of what Shelter's trying to create is a housing market that has more options and can be more affordable. And what the Land Trust is doing is saying, let's create like some affordable options that are outside of the free market, right?
Right.
And what it turns out that we're both subject to like very similar constraints in terms of our outcome, a lot of which is land cost, right? Because for the Land Trust to be able to afford a piece of property, a lot of times the land is the limiting value there.
Yes.
And for the market, a lot of the appreciation in housing across the valley has been not due to the structures themselves becoming more valuable, but due to the underlying land becoming more valuable.
It is. I wasn't exaggerating when I said that lots under the houses that that the Land Trust initially purchased, those lots were $25,000, $30,000 each, and now they are $150,000 or $190,000 in value in a decade. That's a 6-time increase.
Yeah.
It's
And
insane.
the amount of stuff you can legally build on that lot has
not changed.
Increased by 6 times,
No.
right? It has remained static.
Yeah.
So I think that's where you start to get this intuitive understanding of like how, like in a normal market, we have this increase in demand and it would be matched by an increase in supply. But you look at these factors and you're like, that's why it's not happening. That's why we're getting further and further out of sync.
Yes, that's exactly right. And to your point about what you can build on there has not changed until just recently with the with the state of Montana's change in policy. That's the conversation that I keep telling people. You cannot keep doing the same thing again and again and expect a different outcome. We all know what that's the definition of, right? That's just dumb. And so if you think that you can keep just building single family homes on $190,000 single family lots, and somehow that is going to make a math equation that works, it's just insane to think that that's how it's going to go. If you really truly want the people who work in these communities and the young people who want to come back to these communities, if you really truly want them to live here, you better start thinking about other ways to do it. Yeah. And that could be more structures or more housing units on the same amount of land. It could be different tools in the toolbox, whether that's Habitat or the Land Trust or whatever. But we cannot expect that we're going to keep doing things the same way and the market is going to solve the problem. The market is not going to solve the problem.
Yeah, I think so I think this is interesting because this is where when I hear the market won't solve the problem, a lot of times that is said as a reason to not change zoning. To basically say, well, it doesn't matter what the market does.
That's not at all what I mean.
Yeah, and so this is where it's like, this is where I'm interested, where from my perspective, I'm saying, if we incentivize the market to be as unaffordable as possible, then we put more and more and more stress on organizations like the Land Trust and Habitat and city resources to provide housing for tens of thousands of people that they are just never going to have the funds available to do. Right. So how I think about it is if we change the system so that the market is incentivized to build more different types of housing to increase supply of housing that is like more naturally affordable, then the resources that organizations like the Land Trust have can be put to better use because they're then dealing with people who, despite whatever a market is going to do, are never going to be able to afford it, right? I guess what I would say is like the market is never the solution on its own. But if you have a market that's out of balance and not contributing at all to affordability, then I don't think you will ever get broad-based affordability.
Well, I guess when I say you can't keep expecting to do the same thing and expect to get a different result, I'm talking about
the current construction of the housing system is broken. Yeah,
it's totally broken. The way we build it, the way we think about how many houses to put on a piece of land or how many building units, or that this is the other thing. Like, we can't put 3 or 4-story buildings because it's going to ruin the view. Well, the silos in Kalispell is 8 stories tall.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard anybody say that the silos in Kalispell blocked their view or ruined their view?
Oh, man, they're part of our heritage.
Right. And I was involved with that project to get that trail put in Kalispell, and I never ever heard once anybody say, we got to take those silos down because they're too tall. So I think we need to challenge ourselves to re-examine our assumptions about what we just think, well, this is the way it's always been, so this is the way it has to be, or I've heard 20 different people say it, so it must be true.
Yeah. And I think that's also where I think it's useful to look at the framing of the amount of restrictions we have on the built environment and land use are actually fairly new. They're like
they're totally new.
2 generations old. As we talked about, a lot of those great neighborhoods were built before
Not
zoning.
even 2 generations, I don't think.
Right?
Yeah.
Especially in terms of this much apparatus built up around what development can look like. Yeah. It's very recent, and it comes from the top down. It comes from the federal level. In one of our past books, we did The Color of Law, which is all about how single-family zoning emerges once explicit racial zoning is banned at the Supreme Court. Right. I don't even think we have to think different and revolutionize the way that cities are built. The way the American West grows is out of lockstep with not only history, but basically every other developed country. We're kind of on an island.
We are.
We don't need to invent new things in terms of how to build housing. We need to broaden our horizons about what has happened historically and what has happened around the world.
And I will say, being married to a builder, building material prices have gone through the roof, right?
Yeah.
Concrete costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so on top of the land being expensive, everything that goes into building a house has also gone through the roof. And labor has gone through the roof. Yeah. And as somebody whose household income is dependent on that labor getting paid what it's worth, I'm not going to ever say contractors should get paid less money or carpenters should get paid less.
Totally.
They're finally making a living.
Yeah.
So, I had this conversation with my dad, who has built houses in this valley for 50 years and who worked for my grandfather who built houses. So he told me a story about the first house he built, which is he went and paid, I think he and my mom paid $2,000 or $1,000, some crazy amount of money. An amount of money that they had in their bank account at the age of 24. And that's what they paid for their first lot of land. And then my dad went and borrowed $14,000 from the bank to build the house. And they just said, oh, you want to build the house? Sure. Do you want us to put it in your checking account or your savings account? And that was it. It was not like a whole bunch of paperwork and months of discussion.
Yeah.
And so he built that house with my mom's help for $14,000. And at the time, he made $5,000 a year. That was his salary. Yeah. So that house basically cost him, with the land, about 3 years worth of income. And that's not counting my mom's income. Yeah. She worked as an x-ray tech. That is not possible today.
Yeah.
There's no 24-year-old in this valley who has $150,000 in the bank to go buy a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, if they do, lucky them. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're looking at buying houses that are probably 10 years worth of somebody's income. So making $50,000 or $60,000 a year, and now these houses are $500,000 or $600,000.
I think that even you're like, wow, it's a good deal.
Okay.
You know
what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I'm just saying. So my dad is 79. So that gives you a realm of that. But that was here in the Flathead Valley. We just need to recognize that is a fact of life.
Yes.
So when people just say, oh, millennials just need to work harder, save more money, or drink fewer lattes, fewer lattes is not going to get us out of this deal.
We've had some incredibly frustrating meetings during the growth policy process where a lot of younger people get up and basically say the system is not working. I don't think Whitefish is listening to me. They're limiting housing options that are available. And that was taken by decision makers as an attack on them. And the response was basically, well, I was young once and I had to suffer too. And it's like, we're not doing a Olympics about who suffered more. We're trying to say the ratio between home price and income now is dramatically different.
Yes.
This is a massive shift in like the fundamentals of the economy. And so, yes, everyone like had to suffer at some different point in their life, but we need to address the fact that the environment is changing on a broad level. The average age of a first-time home buyer, I say this all the time, was 30 for a long time, consistently stayed at 30. In the past 10 years, it's risen to 41. I appreciate you bringing that up, and also that unique perspective as someone who is from this like lineage of creating housing in the Valley, which I think is super important and super rare as well.
Yeah, I mean, I learned so much from my father and grandfather about building houses, which is maybe why this business is so important to me, is that I can't imagine not having a roof over my head. I mean, my parents were not ever, we survived the 80s, the 70s and 80s in the Flathead Valley. My parents barely had 2 pennies to rub together sometimes, but we always had a solid house to live in.
Yeah.
And that is not the case for a lot of people here. So people have to put up with really second or third rate housing sometimes because that's all they can afford.
Yeah. I think also it's worth pointing out that every input to housing is increasing in price and increasing in price faster than inflation. So it is true that like this is a problem that can't be solved by any one tool. I do think it's worth saying that if you have labor and construction prices increasing so much, I actually think that means we can't just throw up our hands about regulation and zoning and land cost. It's like that actually makes it more important that we're controlling everything we can control. Right?
And that maybe that was very nice when my dad was buying his first lot. I'm pretty sure he bought an acre lot, right? Out at Panoramic Heights, which was a brand new development. And so maybe what worked in the 70s and 80s and 90s in the Flathead Valley for how we thought about how our land should be used doesn't work anymore. Maybe the lots need to be smaller. And I'm part of the problem. The house that Eugene and I live in now, we built it ourselves. We bought the lot way back, more than 10 years ago now. And I just bought it because I like the view. I could see right up into Glacier Park from my deck. And, but it's an acre. And it is a stupid amount of grass to mow and water, which now has turned out to be expensive to water. And I love gardening, but I don't need an acre.
Yeah.
And I look at it and I was like, I would really love to build an ADU down there below my house, and I can't because of the neighborhood that I live in, which I just didn't think about it when I bought the lot 10 years ago.
So this actually connects back to something you said earlier about the way in which your grandfather built homes, which is, you say you're part of the problem. I don't think that that's true at all, but it's more that you're not allowed to be part of the solution.
Yes, maybe that's right.
The amount of regulation that we've created have eliminated the idea of like a neighborhood developer or an amateur developer. Development has become a very professionalized industry in a way that I think is unhealthy. And people like your grandfather who have like more of an idea of where they live and wanting to contribute to that, but don't consider themselves developers who want to deal with capital stacks. That's like a very common historical way in which naturally affordable housing is created, and it is almost impossible to do this sort of incremental community scale development. I think about this because it's like one of my ambitions for the future is that we build that ecosystem where people can put in an ADU in their backyard.
So that's interesting. My grandfather actually was a developer. He had a crew that worked for him, and they would go out and do custom houses for people. But whenever there wasn't a house for somebody else to build, he had this property. It was called Turtle Mountain. It was right in between Big Fork and Mini Lakes. And he'd gone in and put in the road and subdivided it. And every time his crew didn't have anything to do, they would go build a spec house.
Mm.
But that was where you put in a well and a septic tank.
Yeah.
And so when you look at developers today, the thing that we ask them to do that does not seem reasonable to me is to put in all of the infrastructure years before they ever sell their first house. And the carrying costs on that money that asks you to put in all the roads, all the sidewalks, all the lighting, all the water hookups, and all the sewer hookups right up front before you do anything else. And that's usually a city requirement. It's prohibitively expensive. It adds real cost to the building of any house. If we want to conserve our farmland, maybe we need to think about what we're building inside of our city limits. That is a thing that people who are a little bit stuck in their way of thinking about how it should be maybe need to open their mind a little bit to that.
So you lived in Japan for how long?
I was there for 11 years. Okay.
Japan has a fascinating system of housing. Could you talk a little bit about your time in Japan?
Yeah. So I lived in California for 4 years before I moved to Japan, just outside of Los Angeles. So that was an interesting thing to go from Montana to California, which by American standards, people feel is very dense. But then I moved to Kumamoto. It is the size of Flathead County. It has 1 million people. The majority of those people live within 5 or 6 large cities. The biggest one was Kumamoto City. And the huge percentage of the land is still either rice or dairy farming or other kinds of fruit and vegetable farming. So where the people live is very dense. And there are many, many streets where you'd swear it was just a one-way street, but really it's a two-way street because those streets have been there for hundreds of years.
Yeah, before cars were invented.
Yeah. So it's just a whole different concept on size and how closely people can live together. I loved so many things about Japan. I loved the fact that I could hop on the electric train and go downtown anytime I wanted and never have to worry about driving a car or anything like that. I've definitely missed my lakes and my mountains, though. I was just in Boston visiting my son Keaton, and he and his girlfriend live in an older house right off of a few blocks off of Harvard Square in Cambridge. And that house probably was a stately house. Now it has 5 apartments in it. Yeah. And they all have their own separate entrances. They love it. Yeah. Right? It suits their lifestyle. It's close to public transportation. They only need 1 parking spot. They feel like their community is a community. They have neighborhood events and stuff like that, even though it's a lot of renters living in that neighborhood now. I challenge people to really, when they say that, oh, well, if you have renters in this neighborhood, you're not going to have a good community, or you can't divvy up a house into 3 apartments. I'm not sure that preconceived notion holds up to any sort of logic when you look around the country. I mean, Harvard Square is a pretty idyllic little community, and it's filled with older houses that have been divvied up into apartments.
Once again, you say something and I could talk for I could do a 30-minute monologue just about what you said. We have this unique problem in the United States where the only places that are appreciably dense or mixed use are very big cities or places on the East Coast that developed before zoning. Yep. And so I think one of the reasons there's so much prejudice against those types of living situations is because you're conflating the idea of a mixed-use, walkable, dense place with all of the associated stuff that comes with a big city. Oh, and this took a lot of time for me to figure out because when I was learning about all this pro-housing stuff, I was thinking a lot and I was like, but I don't like big cities. I want to be in nature and stuff like that. And so it took me a while until it all kind of thunked into place in my brain. And I'm like, oh, you can actually have dense walkable communities and they don't feel like big cities. Like they're still small towns.
Yes.
And they actually enhance that sort of small town feel and character. And that's why I always loved downtown areas in Whitefish, right? And so I think in our minds, if we can separate big city from like other housing options and walkability, that can go a long way here.
Yep.
I think the other thing is if we're framing everything in this kind of Montana libertarian mindset, which I think is useful to do, just pragmatically.
Yeah.
How I think about it is that a single family home on a large lot, far from services, car dependent, with your monoculture lawn out front. Obviously, a lot of people want that, right?
Yep.
And so it might serve 50, 60% of people at any given time very well. For me, I'm young. I ideally don't spend a lot of time in my house. I don't want to mow the lawn, right? Like
you sound like my kids.
I don't want to drive anywhere. I really don't like that. And you know, when I have kids, it might serve me better, for example. But it might serve 60% of people really well. The problem is it is mandated for 90% of people.
Yes.
Right? And so that's where it's about increasing choice. It's not about restricting people's options, saying you have to live in this big apartment tower. It's saying, hey, it looks like there's a lot of people, based on the fact that all the apartments are full and rent for super high prices, that want to live in different types of housing options, want to live in a condo, want to live in a more dense development. And we make it illegal. So you don't need to change your preference if you're someone who wants to live on 10 acres in the middle of nowhere. But if we're a live and let live state, then maybe we should allow people to choose the preferences around what type of place they want to live. Yeah. If we're in an environment where we have increasing costs throughout every layer of the system, then efficiencies matter a lot.
Yep.
Efficiencies don't matter that much if it's the 1950s and we have the post-war boom and like we're just like going, hey, you know, we're going ham. I think they matter a lot when resource constraints become important. Sprawl is very bad for the finances of a city. It places this really long-term tax burden on a place that outweighs the benefits you're getting from the developer and the property tax in the first place. And it is this kind of profound inefficiency in sprawl right now where we maximize infrastructure cost for a minimal amount of actual people housed.
Yep. Yeah. I learned a couple of things working with Tom Gents when we were taking out the train tracks in Kalispell and putting in the trail, and then planning by putting in the infrastructure that private developers would come in and do all that infill building, which you're starting to see now.
Yeah.
And Tom Gents was really great, and he told me several things. One is that all of these towns, the infrastructure was paid for, at least in some part, you mentioned the 1950s, by the federal government.
Yeah.
You know, the water, the sewer, the roads, the sidewalks, that was all put in with public taxpayer dollars. So it was a community good that was paid for by the community, not each individual home buyer or the developer. The other thing that Tom taught me that I hadn't really thought about was the fire and the police services. That the further out you go from the center of the community, exponentially the cost of it grows. And that doing the type of infill that we were trying to do around where the train tracks had been was actually a cost savings for the community by putting, you know, the silos apartments that are going in there and then the Parkline Towers and all of that. That is the kind of infill that is good for a community.
Yeah, I forgot that you worked on that project.
Oh, it's my baby for a while.
I think it's like such a testament to like the city being willing to commit to something and also be patient.
Yes.
Because it didn't happen immediately, but that area of Kalispell, like the revitalization there and kind of the mixed use and the really good urbanism you're seeing from what was parking lots.
Yeah,
right?
and blighted buildings.
Is really cool to see.
And nobody wanted to build there because nobody wanted to build next to a train line. It took us 10 years to get the train line out and the trail in, and then another 5 years before people started building, new buildings. And
now if you bike down that, are you just like, this is my baby?
Yes, I walk. I walk with my friend Susie on it every Wednesday morning, and I'm like, yes, look at this.
The trail that Kim built.
Kim and Catherine.
A lot of other people.
Kim and Catherine and Tom and a whole bunch of other people.
Totally, yeah.
Yep. And that makes it interesting too. Like in Kalispell, they started that program. They put that infrastructure in where the train tracks were to incentivize infill construction, and Kalispell particularly approves a lot of apartment type living. So each community is doing their solution to this in different ways, and that kind of goes back to my whole, I think you need a lot of tools in the toolbox, and no one tool is going to solve the problem either. We should talk about the Great Fish. It's kicking off next week.
Yes. So the Land Trust is one of the participating members in the Great Fish Community Challenge. Yeah. There are 89 participating nonprofits, which is the most so far.
Yes.
And the first $25,000 that each organization raises, the Community Foundation matches part of those funds.
That's right. That's right. It kicks off on the 11th. They're having a big launch party at the Range Riders baseball field.
5 to 7:30.
Free food, free ice cream and pizza and drinks. They really do a fabulous job. And these 4 weeks of helping the majority of the nonprofits in the Flathead Valley do their fundraising for the year. It's really efficient and celebratory, and it's a great way for the nonprofits to work together as well. I just think, I can't say enough about it. Yeah. I think it's a great way to do it.
If you're donating to the Great Fish Community Challenge, I highly recommend you donate to the Land Trust.
Thank you.
Years ago, I remember being along the side of the highway in summers with, I don't know if you were there with me, but we did a bunch of those things where we were...
Oh, the pop-ups.
The pop-ups trying to get people to donate. Shelter WF is a 501c4, so we aren't part of the Great Fish Community Challenge.
Right.
Still a great month to give some money to Shelter WF as well.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So, that's all I have. Thank you so much for coming on.
Really
is there
great
anything
conversation.
else? Is there anything else you wanna say?
I really appreciate all your work and your team's work to get people to talk about policy and think about, is there a different way to do things?
Yeah.
That is not an easy conversation to have. People don't like change, but change is inevitable. So we either going to control it and make it good, or it's going to happen to us.
Totally.
So I really appreciate Shelter Whitefish and Livable Flathead having those hard conversations.
Yeah. I feel like the luckiest person in the world to get paid to talk about this stuff.
I know.
Because I'm talking about it regardless. Whether I'm on or off the clock, I'm very grateful for it.
I feel the same way about my job. I get to help young people buy houses, and I get to help elderly people make sure that they can stay in their houses, and really, it's hard to think of a job to love more.
Public Comment is a project of Shelter WF. Find out more at shelterwf.org.